So it's too bad. Just well, everything's backwards, isn't it? If you want it to pan left, you have to turn the camera right.
Yeah.
So that's going to be used for what? So what are we using that for?
This is going to be cool music.
Well, except you don't have a CD player.
I know, but I have it on the USB drive.
Oh, it is. Okay. Well, then we'll just play it, right? No. Better ask your dad if we're playing music through the other computer. So forget what we're doing through here. It depends on where I plug this in. Very nice. Dad's a little nervous. Well, not it's nervous, just a little. It's like when they ask you to do weddings. It's a one-shot deal. If you don't get the, I mean, it's not catastrophe. If you don't get the right song at the right moment, right? It does make for the opera. We still want to keep traffic down in front of this thing, but we've got it tall enough that you're going to have to be 7 feet tall to get in this thing. If you went from using your dad's camera, using the computers, and then using hot wire, and then using I guess it's
This is live. So when you say it will be heard downstairs. We're broadcasting.
That's great.
So everything you say, whoever go to the entire world.
I see General
Stand out there and say hi for it.
I think our races is going
This is live. We are now broadcasting. So anything you say will be heard not only downstairs but worldwide.
Is this playing downstairs?
It'll play through this.
I mean, after the service, is it playing downstairs?
No, it's after we play here. As people walk out.
She had to log in something like it.
The link that we sent.
This afternoon.
Yes, all she can do is just click on it. It should take her. Yes. Well, we can then take, after we clear up, then we can take, as long as we're broadcasting, it'll be heard downstairs. So we'll start this up after church. Then we can break, take this, run it downstairs, and plug it in. And run it through the sound system. It would be a problem. Okay?
You're playing stuff through here?
No, the player's not through here.
You're not using this.
No, that's why we asked for the music.
Okay, so I can plug that in. I can plug that in here.
What would it do?
The mini. You gonna run that from right there?
No, she's gonna, you're gonna, Brett's gonna sit here, she's gonna need to come over here on the other side, yeah.
You know, Mike, when you warned whoever it was that they could hear everything you said downstairs, we can hear you downstairs.
Got it. What time is Cora getting on?
Pardon?
What time is Cora getting on?
I assume a little before 1:30
Just a little
version,
before?
probably. I don't know. It's the middle of the night
Oh, I
here.
was gonna say, and, you know, it'd be nice, if you guys come back for before the service starts.
I think we'd all fall apart, so I think it would be best if we didn't, actually.
Understood.
Where do you want this later?
As soon as we get this playlist, we can start.
I'm done.
Then for both before and after.
I had a check before.
I'd like to try it.
Yeah.
Well,
Hi, how are you? Good afternoon.
Okay. Now, you saw the control that I used on that. It's on the right down. Yeah, about that middle to slightly lower than middle. And it'll be the one that's turned up quite a bit. All right, Terry, plug it in. Let's keep the volume very low.
Here's your volume right there.
Okay,
So it's
good.
feeble, but she said they were close friends.
Oh, that's good. Okay, let's go back off. Let's start it again. Let's start it again.
Yes. You should be around.
You would see what I'm saying.
I just told mom and said,
Yeah, it's just gonna
it should go by.
I'll text Emmanuel, although he'll be asleep.
Seems like all I've done the last 2 weeks is go to funerals, and I've got another one next Saturday. I didn't go to Patsy's funeral. I went for visitation. Yeah. That was a surprise.
Yes, it was. It was a bizarre.
How are you?
This is the stuff like so. Just let it go.
Okay, that's fine.
All right. You're going to be here, so we're going to let the things play. If it doesn't, then you just jump in and go to the play first. Okay. Where's your first? Yeah, where you want to sit? This is your seat.
That's where I purchased the company.
Sure. Call it.
Yeah, we're not.
There's your chair. You're going to be here. Paul.
they have at work.
Let's go. Yeah, ready to start.
Long time no see.
Yeah.
You sit up there. No problem. Just let me. Your music. I better say thank you so much.
You guys have a second? One with it, so I was
This is what secretary. It's not That's for me.
Yeah. I love my sketches.
Sometimes. Too many YouTube projects when you're retired. That's the problem.
I hope so. You just go. Yeah, if you would tell me to sit up front.
I'm back here. I'm in this request for the speakers. And the same well, she wanted I just, I don't think I've met her. That's the people that she wanted. No, I see. Tell them it's all wrong. Right here. You gonna sit here, Dean?
I think I'm.
Oh, you're.
If you're speaking,
Ivy's got some. She's got some singing back.
I think I got to shut up. I'll do that. I got to fly.
You may have some more scouts coming up in the
Well, all these people right here are also the basic thing. I got to set up front. I just got to figure out what my wife wants. I guess it's
While she was hugging, I leave it. Do it.
There she goes.
Fine, how you doing? Oh, we lost a friend, didn't we? Yeah, he's such an amazing Christ. One of the quietest, most powerful guys you've ever met. Real cool people. You don't look a day older than you look up in the birthday. I was wanting to be sister. Yeah, well.
I saw your interview.
Did you?
Actually, I did one same day, but you knocked me out, which was good. It was great. You did a great job. Oh, it was really good. You and the Chemtech and everything there. It was really good. Very nice.
But anyway, it was real full. He was full of people. Get a cup of coffee in one hand and sit there and tell you one thing about it. It's really important. Definitely do it. Hey, I appreciate right. An old man. Well, and I was gonna say, I mean, it's very flexible, you know, kind of work on work. But I thought it'd be nice, and I don't know if you we're gonna start talking before now.
You bet. You take care.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the memorial service of Robert L. Nichols. On behalf of the family, we thank you for your presence here today as we celebrate, we recall, and and we honor a man who always gave more than he took in this life. Today, we will hear words like generosity, like respect, words like honor when describing Bob Nichols' life. We will hear Dean Erdl bear witness to Bob's ongoing mission to create and develop young souls of those who are involved in scouting program. You'll hear Dr. Ron Langford speak about Bob's passion for a quality education in all children. You will overhear groups of 2 or 3 tell stories about the good-natured humor and flexibility and the approachability of Bob Nichols. We will close with the qualities that highlighted his life. Let's pray together. Lord, in these moments of reflection this afternoon, open our eyes and open our hearts, not only to the accomplishments of a wonderful life, a wonderful man, but open our eyes to the eternal impact that a life can have even after death. Comfort the brokenhearted this afternoon and encourage the grieving. Amen.
Good afternoon. I've known Bob for a long time, and when I sat down and tried to write whatever I wanted to say, I told someone back here that I wrote it several different times, and when I tried to put it on a computer, and my computer skills, as Bob would tell you, are kind of poor. And by the time I had to redo it, it took hours to put this together, but it's very short. I'm going to begin with going back to July 1st of 1994. I became the new scout executive of the Ozark Trails Boy Scout Council, headquartered in Springfield. This was a merger between the Mocan Area Council out of Joplin and the Ozark Council out of Springfield. The new council served 28 counties in Missouri and 3 counties in Kansas. I'd been on the job maybe 3 or 4 weeks, and I got a phone call from the scout executive that lived up in Columbia, Missouri, at the Great Rivers Council. He said he had been on an airplane coming back from Texas, and he sat next to this super volunteer scouter who had just moved to a place called Webb City. And if I had any sense, I would call on this guy and try and put him to work. And as it turns out, I made that phone call, got an appointment to visit with Bob, and convinced him, and it didn't seem to be very hard to do so, to serve on the executive board of the new Ozark Trails Boy Scout Council. And basically, this began a friendship that, over the last 21 years. Janice, was here, my wife and I, we enjoyed a whole bunch of trips with Bob and Francis, going down to Branson. He seemed to have this thing for Soji Tabuchi, and I don't know how many times we went to see him. The show didn't change that much, but I'm sure that Bob very much enjoyed it. And that I know that even after I retired in 2012, Bob and Francis and Bob, I should put it that way, often came over to Springfield because we had a group of volunteers and we would get together and have lunch on Mondays, and whenever they were in town, they would try and come over and do that. And it's kind of interesting because I wrote down here, I said, you notice that I was trying to make sure that I said Francis first, Francis before Bob. He always put his wife first. And the first time when I sent him a memo or a note and put said to Bob and Francis. I got one back and said, no, it's Francis and Bob. So I just want you to know I've sort of learned my lesson on that one. Bob was a long-time supporter of the scouting program. I know that in some of the paperwork we may have gotten, noticed that he was president of the Longhorn Council in Texas from 1989 to 93. He was president of our Ozark Trails Council from 1998 to 2000. He was recognized in 2007 with our council's Distinguished Citizen Award, which is given to that person that year that does an outstanding job, not only with the scouting program, but in his community, of which Bob did a lot in his community. And then again, in 2009, the central region of the Boy Scouts of America, which covers about 11 states, recognized Bob with the Silver Antelope Award. He had gone through a number of years there where he served the region and worked with their Learning for Life Exploring program, helping young men and young women in the scouting program on an 11-state area. He worked in what we call Area 3. The Silver Antelope Award was the highest award that the region could give a volunteer. And then again in 2011, the Ozark Trails Boy Scout Council presented Bob with the Trail of Honor Lifetime Service Award in recognition of over 30 years of service to the scouting program. One of the many scouting programs that Bob gave some leadership to was a program called Scout Reach. We had this bright idea that there are places in our communities where you can't get parents to volunteer, you can't find leaders. And therefore you have kids that kind of fall under the rug and don't get to get into the scouting program because there's no way to make it happen. So what we did is, with Bob's support and leadership, we went out and we recruited and trained Eagle Scouts or the college students and actually paid them a little bit to become scout leaders in some of the hardcore served areas, to where we could actually reach somewhere between 500 to 700 disadvantaged kids every year. And these are, when I say disadvantaged, we're talking about hardcore. And I'm going to give you a very short little story, a true story. I'm going to change the name. I'm going to call this kid John. There was a young man, he was 15 years old. He was invited to a Scout Reach unit by a friend. And his friend basically just told him, so you need to come because we just played and had a great time. This kid was a street smart kid, but he would have had a hard time with us as a group because he wouldn't fit in. John, the first time I met him was at a thing called Rockin' Ribs. The Rotary clubs in Springfield get together and this huge fundraiser, it's a barbecue thing. And the Boy Scouts were supposed to park cars. This young man was out there in his scout uniform. He'd been a scout less than maybe 2 months and helping to park cars. And watch how I say this. He was, anybody who would come up to him, he would tell him jokes. And he could come up to this gentleman and he'd tell him a joke and it would have to do with a black person. Or anyways, I come up to this boy and I try to explain to him, you really can't do that. You know, you're going to hurt somebody's feelings. Oh, okay, I got it. 5 minutes later, he's telling the same joke, but he turned it to an Italian or something else. He might do a different nationality or whatever, but it was the same joke. Anyways, this young man ended up in a situation where his scout troop went to camp. And in the Scout Reach units, if you couldn't go to camp, you couldn't afford it, there was people like Bob that worked through this program and saw to it that these kids had the opportunity to do the things that other kids couldn't do. So he goes to camp for a week. He comes up to me in the middle of the camp week and says, hey, Mr. Earl, is it true that if I become an Eagle Scout, I could go into the military and win a whole rank and pay grade higher than everybody else? And I said, yes, that's true. Okay, now remember, he's 15 years old. He only had roughly less than 3 years to do this. He turned around and thought that this was such a cool thing that he decided that was going to be his goal. He was going to be an Eagle Scout. Now, I need to tell you a little bit about John. John's dad was in prison and had been there for several years. His mom worked, well, I'm not sure how I would put this word. They got their apartment free because she was sort of a super. She overlooked this apartment complex for low-income people, and she just kind of made sure nothing ran away. And that was probably the only income she had. I'm not aware of anything else. Anyways, this young man did such a bang-up job in his week at camp that they asked if he would like to come back for the last 2 weeks of camp and work at camp. He made $65 a week washing dishes in the dining room. And he came up to me and he says, Mr. Earl, I made $65 a week washing dishes in the dining room. That's more money than my mother has ever brought home in a week. Anyways, the story gets worse before it gets better. This young man left camp, went home, found his mother lying on the floor. She had passed away the night before of something called anaphylactic shock, whatever that is. It was the scouts in the Scout Reach program and the volunteers and our staff pitched together, and we raised the money and paid for his mother's funeral and had enough money left over that we gave to a local church to help this kid. The scout master and a couple other people gave him a place to stay. Then his dad got out of prison. Fortunately, or unfortunately, it only lasted about 30 days before they put him back. And then this kid sort of floats off into the distance. And then I got an invitation to an Eagle Court of Honor in a blinding snowstorm. And I went to this Court of Honor, and this young man stood there and he pinned a badge on him as an Eagle Scout. And he then let everybody know that he had just been accepted and he was going into the Army. And that he was going into the whole pay grade higher than everybody else. And that he was the only kid and the only person in his family who ever finished high school. Now, I tell you this little story because that was one of hundreds of kids in that Scout Reach program that Bob helped make work. And I'm going to kind of close my comments with this. One, Bob was a true scout. He lived by the scout oath of the law. He was trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. His leadership and guidance over the 21 years that he worked with me in the scouting program literally touched one way or the other 64,000 kids here in the Midwest. Those were the kids that he was responsible for. And I think that it's important that, one, his legacy lives on through the thousands of people that he's touched. And we appreciate all that he has done to make this world a better place. He will be truly missed, but not forgotten.
About 4 weeks ago, I had a phone message, and it began as it would customarily do. Hello, Ron. This is Bob Nichols. I'm going to be in Web City for the next 2 weeks, and just wanted to know if we could have breakfast. Now, he normally sent me phone messages. One day, though, he sent me an email, which I quickly misread and responded, well, when you get here in 2 weeks, let me know. And he responded back, I must not have made myself clear. I am here. And Bob can do that with Francis. But Bob and I made arrangements 3 weeks ago today. We had breakfast. And when he got out of the vehicle, he was so gracious as he always was, thanking me for giving up my busy schedule to find time to accommodate him. And we had made plans to do this in June. Phil called last Saturday morning, and quite honestly, I was rather shocked. But knowing, with Bob's age, and I didn't realize Bob was as old as he was. to never activated. But I was a bit shocked because as I was coming to pick him up, I would normally come down Main Street, and oftentimes he would be sitting in the office and he would come out to the office. But sometimes he would be sitting in his vehicle. Well, they were doing some painting and they had some lifts out front. I was more distracted looking at what was going on, and I drove around the corner, parked parallel to the curb, and when I did, Bob came down the street and said, "You drove right by me." I said, "Bob, I didn't see you. I was looking at all this." But Bob looked so good. I mean, he just looked tremendous. So I was shocked. But today, I've been asked to do a eulogy. I will tell you, I cannot do a eulogy for Bob. How can anyone, do that? I don't know what you would say because, first of all, we don't have time for it. But I've reflected a little bit in the last week when Phil sort of made me aware that I was going to be making a few comments. And you start reflecting, and I always like to draw connections and paint word stories and things like that. But I thought of Bob. In my years of education, I would hear the concept of the Renaissance man. Of course, the regeneration of civilization, learned man, was a Renaissance period that we heard about. And a Renaissance man was one who was knowledgeable in many things, seemingly everything. Now, I'm not certain today that we necessarily would identify a Renaissance man the same way. In fact, I know I would add other things to it. One of those things, a Renaissance person would be knowledgeable in many things, but willing to share the knowledge, skills, and expertise in endeavors for the good of others. Bob was a Renaissance man. About 3 or 4 years ago, there was a book that was written by a man by the name of Jim Blickman, who was head of the Gallup poll. The title of the book was Coming Jobs Report. It's a really interesting read about the challenges in the future. And when we think about the importance of education and the challenges in the future, their future is not going to be like our past. And the world itself being hungry for jobs that are not there. But he wrote about a lot of different things. And one thing that he mentioned was about how areas improve themselves. Now, this is going to come as a surprise to you. If we're waiting for Jefferson City or Washington, D.C. to improve things for us, it's just not going to happen. Why does it happen? It's because of what he called tribal leaders. And I found that an intriguing concept. Tribal leaders. What is a tribal leader? A tribal leader is someone in the community who is well connected, who is someone in the community that has universal respect, who is someone when they seek to encourage and prod and promote, people listen because they find value because of their credibility. And I think as I reflected, Bob's a tribal leader. We just underestimate his footprint. We think Web City. Well, it's far greater than ours. When I think about Bob, his interest and support of Eileen and her many interests, historic preservation, as we drive down Main Street, Web City today, how it was 38 years ago when I came to the community and how it is today, somewhat because of that. We've mentioned Boy Scouts. I had that on my list, but I will also tell you a secret. Bob said, I always have Francis make sure you do something for Girl Scouts too. So I would always get a little note in the mail to donate to Girl Scouts. Bob, because of his background, he understands the importance of water, which I'm not sure we all really appreciate how we undervalue its worth. But the Tri-State Water Coalition, we look around and we see the scarred land is now healing because of his involvement in the reclamation of the abused mining land from 100 years ago. And then when I think about his many supporting events that he helped Eileen and such ventures as the Lafayette House. The support of the Web City Foundation. We had a scholarship fund in operation. Bob was always bugging me, Ron, when you start a foundation. So finally, to get Bob off my back, I got the paperwork. I did all the paperwork, and we've had a foundation for several years. And Bob's commitment to education. Bob and I really connected there. And, he had such an interest in education. I came back talking about some real concerns I had about 12, 13 years ago, when there was actually activity and discussion at the leadership level of defunding education. And I made a presentation to the Chamber of Commerce. Webb City Schools cannot afford the schools it has today without state contribution, and if they cut money at the state level, it's going to be adverse to the opportunity of kids in our community. Well, that's all it took to start the fire with Bob. You know, Bob, when he got something going, he didn't just, it was organized, it was planned, people had jobs to do, and the next thing you know, we had the Committee for Adequate Funding for Education. And I look out and I see Lucinda's here, and Jeff Montgomery's here, and Brad Baker's here. They all participated in that. Bob was a catalyst. We would go to Mount Vernon and we would meet. It was a Southwest Missouri regional event. And one day we got in the car and we drove to Jefferson City, and we got an audience in the governor's office with then Governor Bob Holden. Now, he was not in office all that much longer, but that's how much activity we had going on because of this tribal leader. Governor Holden did not win his re-election in 2004, and Matt Blunt did. 2005, there was a new foundation formula that was put in place. Whether all people like it or don't like it, we never will have a formula that fits that criteria. But we wound up having an appreciation breakfast in Jefferson City in 2005. Again, many of us going there. Governor Blunt was there, and many of the elected legislators. And if that foundation formula could be funded today, the benefits to Webb City, Southwest Missouri would be significant. And even without full funding, you can look at the numbers, and because of that effort. And that even led to a ceremonial signing of the bill in our high school by Governor Blunt because of this tribal leader. But what's more important to me personally than what happened through that was my development of a relationship with Bob Nichols. Bob Nichols and I would go to Jefferson City, and now we drove to Nevada, we'd drive here, we drove over to Nixon, we'd drive here and there. You know, Bob liked to tell stories, and you love to listen to what he had. And you know, he always talked about Francis. And I find it very interesting because those of us who knew them both, I don't know if we could have a couple that was more of what we would call the odd couple. The way they looked at things, the way that Francis was very looked at things very much one way, and Bob was always the conservative one. Now, Bob did tell me, I thought I was conservative when I was in Texas till I came to Missouri. I found out I'm a wild-eyed liberal. He said a Republican in Texas is not the same as a Republican in Missouri. And that was interesting. But he talked about Francis. He told me about when he was working somewhere and staying in this hotel, and this beautiful lady working as a young lady working in the restaurant area, working her way through school. And that was Francis. And I know of no one that Bob had more respect for than Francis' father, because of his commitment to his children, that they have education. Little did I know back in 1993 when I stayed in a place way out west, that I thought, man, this is way out west. Hobbs, New Mexico. And I woke up, we were staying in this Super 8 motel, and it was really at the time Hobbs was struggling. And we parked our car up out the window because we weren't sure it would be there the next morning. But when I went in and checked out, there was this huge football stadium. And I thought, well, they've got a college, they've got a college stadium. Well, back during all of the oil years of the 80s, and they had a big population, they built that. But that's where Bob's family was. Where Francis' family was from. Her brother was assistant superintendent was there. So that always meant more to me that I had been there and seen it. But you know, I really think Francis and Bob balanced each other. Bob was so supportive. Francis, Eileen, whatever they wanted to do. But in turn, she was so supportive of him as well. Now, he told me two funny stories, or they were funny to me. But Bob was, we would talk, and he said, you know, I traveled a lot when we were putting in those water impoundments out in Texas, and what have you. He said, I'd be gone sometimes 2 to 3 weeks at a time. And I believe Bob's father had passed away, so Bob then not only had his farm out east of Dallas that he was taking care of, but then he was given the responsibility of taking care of his father's farm. And so Francis offered up some assistance and said, Bob, I tell you what, you're working hard. If you'll just worry about, your dad's farm, I'll take care of ours. Bob said, that sounded good to me. So I flew back in one Saturday morning after being gone for about 2 weeks. And I don't know exactly that community, but I know where Rockwall, Texas is. My son goes out there and works 3 days a week, and it's not very far from there. And Bob said, I drove up Saturday morning, and there were cars parked all over our front yard. And I got out and I found a neighbor, and I'm going to say John. I have no idea if it's John or not. John, tell me what's going on. Well, Bob, you're having adoption. So he sought out Francis for more clarification, to which he responded, Bob, I told you I would take care of our farm. Now, if you want me to help you with your farm, I'll help you too. And then I thought, and I told him that story so many times, so funny. And then another story he would tell, he would say, one time they were gathering and someone asked them, he heard Francis say they'd been married 22 years. And he said, I said, Francis, we've been married 44 years, not 22. She said, Bob, that is not what I was asked. I was asked how long we have been together. He was gone so much, she was clarifying. Yes, they'd been married 44 years, but he had been absent for 22. But I think about adoption, he'd love to tell those stories, and he would laugh, but I would tell you his love for Francis. And I look back on my phone, and I only had one message from Bob, but I listened to it before I came. It was 2013. He said, Ron, we're going to be in Web City around Labor Day, and he'd tell you when he's going to be there, how long he's going to be there. I wonder if we could get together and have lunch. And Carolyn and Francis and Bob and I went out to Olive Garden, I believe it was, on Labor Day 2013. And certainly just enjoyed our time together. 1992, Robert Redford had a movie out, A River Runs Through It. And some of you have seen it. And, it's about a Presbyterian minister who had two sons. One was very orderly, organized, and driven, and the other one was a little bit more reckless lifestyle. But the notion of that was, you can have different circumstances, but there are common things that run through it. And I thought about Bob, and I really think about Bob. We would have to say about Bob, rivers run through it. Because he connected. He was maybe the best connector I've ever seen. The ability to connect with people. And if you look at things historically, and all the studies that show significant things that happen, why is it some people can make it happen, other people can do the same thing, and it doesn't happen? And it goes back to the credibility of the person. And Bob had that credibility. He had the ability to connect with people. He wanted to connect with people. And one other story. In their business, which was very successful, he told me the story one time that we got so big doing so much business, we bought a plane. And said, then I got to noticing we were having meetings. And I would say, well, he'd name a town, and nobody knew anybody in that town. And he kept listening about that, and he said, sell the plane. We used to know somebody in every town. We might not do business there, but we drove through towns where we were doing business. We stopped and we talked, and we're flying over everybody we need to connect with. And I think Bob demonstrated that in his life. So he networked. I thought maybe I was the only one who got to have breakfast with him. I know that's not true. Wally Kennedy, when he called me and wrote the article last week, and he and I chatted for a good while, and he said, Bob would call him and say, and they would meet at the Red Onion. And I know Bob had meetings with everyone. Why did Bob do that? Bob understood the principle that was spoken of in Scripture a long time ago, where there's no vision, the people perish. Progress is not by staying where you are. It's by moving forward. And I will tell you, the thing that's most frustrating to me in this country, as a person who's lived a whole lot more of their life than I'm probably going to get to live, We don't have leadership in this country with vision. We point fingers and we're playing. Bob had vision. This is what we're going to do. Why are we going to do that? For my grandchildren and his grandchildren that he was so very proud of. And Bob also hearkened to what Jesus, when he talked about his disciples being fishers of men, Bob was a fisher of men and women to get them engaged. He made us see beyond the horizon. He caused us to have vision and aspiration and goals greater than we might have had we not had his urging. In my 42 years of education, I can tell you the greatest educators who significantly influence the life of students are those that cause them to believe they can achieve at a level greater than they ever thought possible. Bob was a great teacher. I would say that a compliment paid to you is nice to hear. A compliment said about you to others is a true compliment. But I think the greatest compliment is when someone can say, I wish I could be like them. For years, I have said, I hope I can be like Bob Nichols. Why would I want to be like Bob Nichols? Because Bob wanted to get up every day with purpose, plan, and vigor toward what he was trying to accomplish. Retirement was not in his vocabulary. When I retired to Webb City 5 years ago, I did not intend to be doing what I'm doing now. I would tell you what I do now is not nearly as satisfying as what I used to do. But I don't know what I would have been doing had I not been doing something. And that's kind of like Bob. So I give Bob a great compliment of saying, I want to be like Bob. I want to leave you with a little poem. I wore a very busy tie today, which is about education and has some of the things that have been critical in Bob's profession as far as measurements, what have you. Bob was a very busy person. But there was a poem, and probably most of you have heard it, but it's a bridge builder. An old man going along a lone highway came at the evening, cold and gray, to a chasm vast and deep and wide, through which was flowing a sullen tide. The old man crossed in the twilight dim. The sullen stream had no fears for him. But he turned, and when he reached the other side, built a bridge to span the tide. Old man, said a fellow pilgrim near, you're wasting strength in building here. Your journey will end with the ending day. You never again must pass this way. You have crossed the chasm deep and wide. Why build you the bridge at eventide? The builder lifted his old gray head. Good friend, in the path I have come, he said, there followeth after me today a youth whose feet must pass this way. This chasm that has been not to me, to that fair-haired youth may a pitfall be. He too must cross in twilight dim. Good friend, I'm building that bridge for him. I think that's the bottom of this. As I was preparing my homily this week, I thought about what made Bob Nichols special. Because we all knew that Bob was generous with everything. But a lot of people are generous with their belongings, with their resources. And I think I found the answer in the 23rd Psalm. It says, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. And he restores my soul. He guides me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou dost prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, and my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and loving kindness will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Bob had a caretaker's heart. That's what separated him from everyone else. He cared for many things. He cared for the earth. We heard testimony about how he loved water and the land. He would have read Genesis 1 different than this probably. It said that God created man in his own image, and in the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created him. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth, and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over every living thing that moves on it. Then God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the surface of the earth, and every tree which has fruit yielding seed. It shall be food for you. Bob wouldn't have read that as someone to be controlling, someone who rules harshly over God's creation. I don't think Bob would have approved of destroying the earth for profit. But God told Bob that he was a caretaker, and Bob took that very seriously. He cared for the earth. He cared for the water of the earth. And he cared for all God's creation. Bill Nichols sent me a story of how Bob cared for every being and every animal. It goes like this. I can remember when we lived at the farm and we had several cats. One day we were all in the living room, and for some reason my dad had a cat sitting on his lap. A bit unusual, as Dad was not much of a pet person. Well, as Dad was petting this cat, he stopped and said to Eileen, "You need to feed this cat. Its stomach is growling." Of course, the cat was just purring. But this is a new experience for Dad. Another great pet story would be the time that Dad ended up with Shep as a pet. As normal part of living on the farm, it was not unusual to come home and find a stray cat or a stray dog that someone had dumped in front of our house. Dad would make it a habit to chase them off in hopes that they would end up at one of the neighbors' houses. One day he came home and there was a beautiful collie hanging around the house. Well, shipping it off and shooing it off down the road is his standard practice, and he shooed the dog down the driveway, then headed down the road. He went back and got in his car to shoo it further down the road. As he drove and honked the horn, he lost sight of the dog and stopped to get out to make sure that the dog was moving away. Well, he walked around to the front of the car, picked up a few small rocks to throw at it, but the dog was nowhere to be seen. When he turned around, he found the dog sitting in the front seat of the car. That was when Dad decided he had a new pet. Bob's caretaker heart extended to his family. He delivered one of the most beautiful speeches, stories at Kit and Emily's wedding. Emily relayed a story to me a few days ago about how Bob and Francis would take the kids and have fun with them. One night they were all in bed together. Bob was reading and Francis was reading as well. And Cora and Emily were teasing Bob. Now Bob could have demanded his privacy. He could have demanded that no one bother him. I'm reading. My life's important. But he didn't do that. As Cora was teasing him about his nose, he said, I've got a Roman nose. And Francis said out loud, yeah, your nose is Roman all over your face. And with that, the two girls cracked up and fell off the bed. But you can see how Bob loved his family, and he had a caretaker's heart for them. We live on in two ways in this life. We live on in the life beyond. We live on in life with our God. And we live on in the lives and memories of those whom we've loved. No one is dead until they're forgotten. And we will never forget Bob Nichols and the impact that he had on our lives. We will always remember. At the rising of the sun and the going down, at the blowing of the wind and the chill of winter, at the opening of the buds and the rebirth of spring, at the blueness of the skies and the warmth of summer, at the rustling of the leaves, in the beauty of autumn, in all seasons, we will always remember Bob. We shall remember the times of joy, and we shall remember the times of pain. We shall remember those quiet times of peace, and we shall remember the grief of parting. In all emotions, we will remember Bob Nichols. In the examples lived among us, for the lessons taught and learned, for the concern felt about us, for the love shared with us, for all reasons, we shall always remember Bob Nichols. Let's all pray the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. This concludes our service today. Bob loved table fellowship. It didn't matter if he was taking communion here at the altar rail on Sunday mornings, or if his table included a dinner at the Red Onion or Outback Steakhouse. Bob loved company. He loved the conversation, and he loved the food. It's appropriate today that we have a meal waiting for us in the large and the small dining rooms, and everyone is welcome to join us down there. We will dismiss the first three rows of the family first, and then the rest of us will join them. Thank you for your attendance. It means a lot to the family. God bless you. Amen.